What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
I'm Gian.
And we're here for a very special guest that a lot of you want us to have back on, as well as us. So we're here with Aimee Terese.
Hi, Aimee.
Hi, boys. How are we?
Oh, we're just coping, just surviving.
Yeah, lots happened.
How's the revolution of the twinks coming along?
Not a body here in sight. And
Good. I'm glad we're social distancing.
Yep. It's going it's going the same as every revolution really these days.
So so it's petered out with a whimper.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. You had some product placement, you made a few careers, and now it's over.
We're actually staff writers at Jacobin now.
Yeah.
So it's on the horizon. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. We're just grifting our way to the top.
It's not grifting, baby. It's not grifting.
No, you're right. If we, well, I mean, that implies we are sincere and just wrong. But
no, I mean it's not grifting. If there's a whole fucking industry and economy around which this genre of production, discourse production, is based, it's not a grift.
It's doing politics.
It's politics of a kind. It's deeply submerged within a neoliberal politics, or as I would call it, perhaps even an anti-politics, in as much as it has very little to do with political power and broader questions that traditionally we thought politics was about. It's basically like a neoliberal fandom, but.
Yeah, so then that's the grift we're on.
Me being the number one, cynicism is the number one enemy of the multi-level marketing scheme. So don't let me piss all over your parade.
So Aimee has been on the podcast before. I think you're our first returning guest.
Yeah.
Good figure. Yeah, look at that. 2 times lucky. If you don't know Aimee,
Third time's a charm.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't know Aimee, you're not familiar with her work. She is the host of a podcast called What's Left, which is excellent. Recommend you check it out. She's a Marxist and a general cool person. Yeah, I think we'll go with that. That's your intro, Aimee.
Awesome.
It's a slick show around here.
Real slick.
So we did want to ask you a little bit about how's the Rona going for the world and for you?
I don't know. I have a bit of a headache, to be honest. I'm not sure if this is corona related or it just happened in the last half hour, but I'm feeling a bit migrainey. I just took some paracetamol and ibuprofen. So your everyday analgesics have not run out. Ooh. That's a good sign. Big Pharma, keeping the product coming in. Beyond that, really, I live by myself, so there's not been any dramatic changes in terms of living arrangements or anything. Australia initially, the biggest interruption it made to my life was the fact that for about a month there was no toilet paper to be found anywhere, which I always found kind of bizarre how quickly something as basic as toilet paper just suddenly we were running short of it. I don't know, but Australia's pretty, I don't know if you guys have heard, but it's pretty racist.
What?
Yeah.
So Scotty for marketing had no real problem instituting travel restrictions.
Yeah. They were like, "Oh, is there a virus?" No, we were just shutting the borders anyway.
Is there any plausible reason whatsoever to do what we want to do anyway? But no, there's not. I mean. There has been significant interruptions to regular life. We've had lockdowns, we've had all manner of different businesses shutting down in-person operations, all that sort of stuff. Pretty much the same as any of the lesser affected areas of the US, I would imagine. We've yet to have any of the mile-long lines outside of Walmart or whatever.
Are there Walmarts in Australia?
No.
Oh, okay.
We have Kmart, which is kind of similar, although it doesn't have I think it got recently bought out by a company who started doing a lot more of the Walmart style, like buying super cheap Chinese shit and making it like Kmart brand. But so it doesn't really have any brands other than Kmart brand now. So it's basically like a big like Dollar General almost. It's fucking weird. But like I have no idea why I'm talking about Kmart, mind you.
It's the product placement.
Yeah, just blabbing on. But I mean, it's sort of, yeah, I think it's probably akin to some of the lesser affected areas of the States in terms of numbers. Like they've actually been remarkably low. We're very lucky in that regard. Yeah, beyond that, I've seen a lot of like, I don't know. I don't even really know what to think about it, to be honest. I think like it's very tempting in moments like this to sort of make hay in terms of whatever your particular political orientation is, but I just don't think there's like, I don't have any, super unique insight. I don't think anyone who thinks that like a financial crisis and like a pandemic is gonna open up space to like do some communism and shit is out of their fucking mind. I'm sorry, but like something that threatens people's like physical safety as well as their livelihood, like those are levels of vulnerability like for working people. Like most working people can't afford like a $500 emergency. I don't know what kind of crack you're smoking if you think you're going to make people like tons more precarious and vulnerable, and that somehow out of that is going like they're going to emerge the winners. This is silly. This is like fantasy to me. So like to my mind, to the extent that like anything can come out of it, like it's maybe some form of consciousness, but even then, like I see a lot of the way people, even the left media, look at this as like a way in which they can sort of continue making pleas at the same people in power who have no interest or obligation in advancing the causes of a class that is not their class, like
It
they
feels
constantly be like, this proves we need Medicare for all. Why the fuck does it do that? No, it doesn't. Like, do you think that just like rational arguments is what you've been missing? You just needed a fucking better reason for the ruling class to like give you stuff? No, you've got fucking 16 million people out of work now. Like that is not a position of leverage. If I see one more person talk about a general strike, oh my god.
Well, but that's the fascinating thing, right? Is there's two responses there. One of which is the total sort of depoliticization or the desire to depoliticize the response, right? Being the idea of like the only wrong response in this case is to make it political. And then the other one is that
that's just absurd on its face.
Of course it is.
It's inherently political. There's no, what the fuck are you on?
Yeah, it's about who lives and dies. Why would that be political?
What the fuck are you talking about?
And then the other end of it is, as you say, right, is the general strike. Like, you're not at work, you're not getting paid, but I'm going to withdraw my labor now. Now is the time.
Yeah, what the fuck are you talking about, you clown? Like, this just has never made any sense. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very bored with the whole like, do we hate China? Do we not hate China dialectic? It's very dull and retarded. Like, I don't like none of this is. I don't know. I see a lot of like. There's this very interesting, I think, dynamic where, so you've got like the petite bourge right wing and petite bourge like left wing in the States, and so you're like those representing the left flank of capital versus the right flank of capital, and so like the ones on the right, like your Bannon-esque, maybe even Tucker to an extent, certainly plenty of the Republicans, and Trump himself as well, doing the whole like big bad China. And then like you've also got, I think, to a pretty like so you have that, and then you have like the demi-racist, everything's about race and feelings and like, sentiments and hate crimes are up, and it's like you're the ones who are constantly inserting race into this when it basically has nothing to do with race. Like, I'm sorry, but this is like the extent to which that identitarian discourse has any fucking relevance now is extremely limited. And so, like, you've got people doing that, and then you've got them doing the wonderful, like, disparities thing, which is, like, the best way to distort what's actually happening and split the working class, like, into a set of competing identitarian constituencies, when in fact, like, that shouldn't be the way you look at it, because it's totally distortionary anyway. So that's like your AOC, your Liz Warren, your Ayanna Pressley, like tons and tons of articles in Jacobin and other sorts of leftoid shit that's all about like the disparity and the outcomes. But then what I find the most interesting is like these like somewhat tankies, but certainly not self-described tankies.
So
but
me.
like,
No, I'm just kidding.
but like these people whose like their intuitions are like not with the petty bourge of America, but like reflexively with the petite bourge of China almost. So they like are like resentful of America and like American power, American exceptionalism. But the way that they sort of operationalize that sentiment is so fucking numbnuts that like you find them making arguments that are just totally in defense of like the ruling class or the petite bourge of China. It's just like, what are you doing, you dumbo? Like you don't need to run reactive, like to not like by the petite bourge right wing line in America of like fomenting bullshit about China. Like China is just being a self-interested state in the same way that America is. Like there's nothing magical about it. But at the same time, you don't need to like orientalize China as though China doesn't have class contradictions, like don't just like wrap the Chinese petite bourge,
Yeah, 1.2 billion people acting in perfect concert. There are no internal contradictions.
Yeah, like stop essentializing the Chinese people. It's so fucking silly. Like, you can criticize what the Chinese government is doing without that being anything to do with like race or ethnicity. The Chinese government itself represents like the forces of like the class forces in that country. Like it's not whatever. I don't know. Sorry, forgive me.
No, it's good.
My annoying nuance and shit.
So what have you been doing in your free time? Have you been doing any banners?
Emergency banner drop action?
My like crabapple style banners, just dropping them, tweeting online about it.
Yeah, on OnlyFans.
Yeah, like maybe
being a weaponized naked girl, you know how it is.
Yeah, if people didn't see this video,
standing for Assad, shit. Is it Assad or is it like his opposition, the moderate rebels?
So she's tagged around with like the Salafi jihadists and like Idlib and shit against the Syrian Assad government.
Yeah, I would probably have difficulties with them because like I'm half Lebanese Maronite. I don't think they'd be friends of mine.
Oh,
I think I'm actually the enemy. I think, is this how we do sectarianism?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay, all right.
They're just moderate rebels, guys. They're the good guns. They're secular.
So if people didn't see this video, it circulated. It was Daniel Denver, I guess, and Molly Crab. Yeah, thank you. And Molly Crabapple and
some other girl,
some other people. It's all people sort of associated with the Jacobin podcast mostly. Did this video with which had taught you how to transform the outside of your home into a space for public protest where you could unfurl a banner. And they had some great slogans.
It's embarrassing. It's just so fucking stupid.
People over profit.
Suck my dick. What, did you get that paint for free?
Yeah.
Honestly, like what are you even talking about? What are you talking about? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Action.
The fuck are you
Activism.
doing? Do you think I'm sorry, but do you think people are retarded? Do you like how I'm sorry for using that word. I know it's not an appropriate word, but like in what world are you doing okay, let's just put aside any of the politics of it, just any of it whatsoever, right? Like just on its face, do you think you're teaching people anything when you buy a piece of fabric and some paint?
Well, their Crime Think article actually told them that they do a banner.
But is this something that like are you like
people were confused about this? They didn't know how to make banners, I guess.
What? Is this a joke?
Yeah,
I don't understand what's like. okay, other than like being a State Department flunky and lurking around with weed and all the other bullshit associated with Molly Crabapple, like she does do a like kitschy little art bullshit. Did she teach you like how to do kind of calligraphy lettering or like a specific like artistic skill?
No, that would be great, right? No, I mean, it's just literally like the same shitty banner I would make.
People are like scummy, like bad people. Yeah. Not bad people. I think they're shit politics, basically. Like they're force for bad. But like that might be useful. I don't know. As a kid, I watched Art Attack, that English chap called Neil Buchanan. Remember? And he would do. Did you ever watch this?
Yeah, no, I've seen the show.
Did it make it to New Zealand?
It made it to New Zealand. Yeah,
it was fun. I liked it. Yeah. Like if she was doing some kind of Art Attack thing, where she like passed on some of her skills in any way, shape, or form.
Right, like Bob Ross banner drop would be pretty cool, actually.
Sure, yeah, but like there was no imparting of any kind of skill set. It was just like, oh, if you get like stuff with pigment, sticky stuff called paint, you put it on a surface. That's like, is this a joke? I don't know. Anyway.
Well, the politics of it, though, were also interesting because it was about that there's a radical act going on here. By remembering to put a banner outside, you are making a statement.
Well, they said reclaiming public places. And it's like, it's your house. That's not a public place. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, that's where I got the shits on that one. You know how I am. It's just, it was farcical. It was farcical in its face. Like, first off, most people don't have time for this bullshit. Or even, like, why would you waste money doing this for a start?
Yeah.
Like, no, like, honestly, like, let's say if you got all that crap at, like, the cheapest possible amount, let's say it was $30 for, like, some fabric, some rope, some paint, and some brushes, like $30. Most people don't have $30 to waste.
I know we've got Trump bucks now. I'm spending $1,200 on paint and fabric.
Good on you, bro. No, but seriously, but also, like, putting something outside of your window, like physically on your property, that's your property. That's not public space. That's by definition, that's private space. That's like getting a fucking tattoo and saying I'm doing a public protest.
The Bernie tattoo.
It's literally the same. No, like it's literally the same thing.
Yeah.
Wait, didn't somebody just get a Ruth Bader Ginsburg tattoo?
Yeah, someone I showed, or who was it?
Who was it? It's somebody famous.
Oh, it's who was Ariana Grande's former
Pete fuckface, whatever.
Yeah, you got an RBG tattoo.
So
on his chest.
he's I think actually doing better praxis than.
Does he have a vagina?
Well, she left him, so clearly.
What the shit is so embarrassing.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
My God.
There's too much cringe in the world. It just cringe overload some days.
No, cringe is fine. Like cringe is, as my friend Bug Beef says, you got to be cringe before you can be cool. That's fine. But like, if you're a super mega fucking mega star who's loaded, no, that's not cringe. That's deeply embarrassing. Like, what the fuck are you doing? What's wrong with you? Get your head checked, bro. But really, like the reason that I objected to the Denver thing is because like his entire politics started, and he's openly said this, like published articles to this effect. It started at the battle in Seattle in the late 90s, and his overwhelming politics subsequent to that have remained totally anarchist in their way he operationalizes things. It's fundamentally anarchist. The way that entire crowd of people deploy power is anarchistic. It's a sort of like artists and activists and bohemians and intellectuals and professors who use like unaccountable social coercion and smearing and ostracizing people as a method of doing politics because they refuse to engage the political. So when they have an issue with someone or something, their methods of dealing with it, rather than engaging, the substantive political disagreement at hand and actually having some form of dialogue, they use 1,000,001 different methods to just eject that person or that discourse out of the frame. And so, like, I think we saw an example of that this week where Lily Lynch online was just like, banners don't do shit, which is absolutely right. Of course they don't. Like, banners don't do shit. And she said as much openly, having quoted him to do so. And she got like messages from this other complete anarchist hack named Joshua Clover, who works at UCLA, is like buddies in Denver, who like works at Brown or wherever, some other Ivy college. Like, can you please take that down? Dan's like a really nice guy or whatever. And it's like, hold up, bitch. Dan just like said a whole bunch of like incredibly rude bullshit to Lily in response, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Are you toxic? Like, are you just having a shitty day? Why would you say that? It's like, you don't get to be a big, like, the thing that I find so instructive is that these people act like absolutely like fragile little babies if anyone disagrees with them, but then they exercise control like behind the scenes through this like socially coercive means. You know what I mean? Like, to receive shit. Like, why didn't Clover message Dan and say, hey man, like, why are you swearing at a woman on the internet for no reason?
Yeah, this is just Gamergate, but with banners.
Yeah, like
Bannergate.
the way the discipline is exercised always goes in one direction, which I find very fascinating. And like, particularly someone like Dan who runs a good game is like this woke lord fucking who whatever. But like, he has form for doing this too, like just being totally like repugnant in his behavior of women and smearing them, and then just like, because he and his little Ivy League mates have enough power to drown out any political disagreement whatsoever and to set the terms of debate, they somehow manage to maintain the illusion that like that they're the good guys. Like, he's pulled the shit with Angela as well, and it's just always a method of stamping out anyone whose arguments are representing the working class, as opposed to the bullshit like petite bourgeois anarchist nonsense that they engage in.
Well, it's so funny as well. Like, these men often identify as like male feminists, but they will attack every single woman who like disagrees with them online and call them a bitch and shit. Like, every single one. Yeah. It's like the nice guy veneer. Like, oh, I'm a nice guy, and anyone who's being mean to me or like critiquing me is actually committing violence, and I'm going to be crazy, and that's justified. But I'm still a nice guy. It's like,
no, it's the bitch who's crazy.
Yeah,
her
exactly.
reaction was crazy. She's crazy. She's mean.
Yep.
Fuck off.
Hashtag nasty woman.
Well, she's toxic. She's toxic.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in pulling on that thread a little bit about the sort of the anarchist politics that seems to permeate some of the like, essentially I think you called it there the sort of the left flank of capital, but if it's the PMCs that inhabit whatever left movement there is, right? I mean, and yet they seem to be to a person some sort of like socialist libertarian or anarchist or something that is entirely compatible with like liberalism, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think regardless of whether they're prepared or willing to acknowledge that or identify in that particular way, I think the prevailing structural constraints in which the so-called left operates are within a market. So politics is fandom, it's a market. And so the logic of a market is anarchic logic, right? Like, a market mechanism is necessarily like an anarchic way to distribute, well, in theory, goods and services. But if this is a politics, then like you're distributing ideas and like, political sentiments and commitments and whatever else. So like that logic is necessarily like, if you are operating through an anarchic context, like a market, like an attention economy, then anarchic logic is the logic that's going to be successful within that context. Even if like your branding is, well, I'm a Marxist, the nature of this thing is that necessarily what you're looking at is a bunch of self-interested career actors doing like selling products within a marketplace, because there's no like centralized like party mechanism going on other than perhaps the Democratic Party. but like there's no DSA doesn't even have like a centralized control. It's not like any of this is like actually coherently centralized.
Mhm.
Well,
It
the
is
way
not.
DSA paints itself as you know, the nice you know, compatible with democratic values version of, yeah, and not the Communist Party is precisely by not having a line, which is just infuriating.
It's necessarily anarchist.
Yeah,
it's literally saying we refuse to like any form of party discipline. Right. Okay. Well, then it's horizontalist, so it's useless.
Right. There was the DSA. It was
sorry, but like, if you can't institute any form of party discipline, you don't have a party. You don't have a coherent anything.
Somebody
that's fine. Like, I would rather that DSA be horizontalist. And honestly, there was a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys are sort of paying attention to this bullshit then, but there's a bit of a drama in terms of like brake lights and other yeah, so I remember at the time thinking, the fuck are they doing? Like, how is this political? Like, why are they doing brake lights? Like, it seems like a bit of a waste of resources for a socialist organization. And definitely, like, even a little bit subsequent to that, it was like, do you remember the fracas over the sewing circle?
No.
The queer sewing circle. That was that was like a queer sewing circle
at one of
their DSAs, and they posted about it. Yeah, and I was just talking to someone online. I didn't realize how deeply imbricated this particular person was in actually the exact same thought-leading circles that we've just been alluding to. And she got very pissy when I had the audacity to ask, like, what's the political trajectory of this? how are like queer people, like, how is this, like, what? I don't really understand. Like, also, if we're just talking about like the inability of a market to cater to a demographic, like, there are plenty of people who are not queer who the market fails to cater to also. Like, we're just talking about market failure here. Like, it's fine, I don't give a shit, but like, I'm just a little confused as to how this is like socialist activity. Anyway, that means that I'm like homophobic or something. I don't know, it never really made much sense at the time.
Somebody
but
did
it turns out they schooled me, because now the queer sewing circle's been sewing masks.
So fuck, it's praxis.
So, yes, exactly. So I was like up yours, haters.
The DSA proliferation of caucuses was just got to self-parody levels at one point, and there was somebody, I don't know who, but somebody did a Twitter just parody account, which was the DSA Capitalist Caucus, and that was sort of the final word on it. It's like, that's not actually parody. Exactly, it's not incoherent at that point.
Sorry.
Yeah,
like that's what that is,
right?
Like, ultimately, I think maybe it was like 18 months ago, a couple of years ago, it was I think it was Elon Musk said something to the effect of like, I'm actually a socialist. Like, haha, very funny, but like, actually, that's basically what DSA is and does. Like,
they don't launch rockets though.
It's techno-libertarianism.
Yep.
Like, it's the same thing. It's all I honestly think the most fascinating thing to happen is like, okay, so the Ron Paul moment and whatever, like, the extent to which that kind of like balls to the wall right-wing libertarianism is going to catch on is limited fundamentally.
Yep.
But like, if you can do the same politics, but wrap it up in like the moral absolutism of the left, that's a banger.
Yeah.
Like, if you can, like, if suddenly it's morally righteous to open borders, if suddenly, abolishing the family is how we #abolish capitalism, if suddenly like the neoliberal austerity and rollback of the state is actually like a form of social justice to just be, abolishing the Fed or whatever, like, I think it's kind of genius, but I think a lot of people have their eyes very much closed to the fact that the so-called left is just advancing a class project that's not. It's not in any way, shape, or form a working class project. It's whatever. Sorry, I'm so negative.
No, I mean, you're in the right place. The interesting thing about like some of those moves, like they kind of abolish the family stuff. DSA, unfortunately, I think for a lot of people ended up fulfilling a role which was just like people are so alienated. And
yes, absolutely.
And so it becomes a social club
and that's fine.
Yeah, no, it's great, cool. But it's a social club. It has very little political change. It has a theory of change.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of alluding to. Sorry, I know I babble, but yeah. So the reason I brought up the thing about the bracelets and the sewing thing. So initially, like back then at least, I was like, oh, that seems like a waste of resources, particularly with like the voting campaign coming up and stuff. Like, wouldn't you be trying to do politics, whatever? No, I would just prefer if they just embrace all this like Rotary Club shit. Like, just do that. That's great. That's fine.
We'll
much better.
We'll abolish the family and replace it with queer sewing circles.
No. Thanks.
Fuck.
Soza.
Well, we should cancel our group then, Gia.
Yeah, we've got to I mean, if
that's what
something.
You're into, cool, whatever. But like, I don't even understand. Like, it's just kind of sad and depressing to me that like the whole Sophie Lewis thing. It's like all you need to do is take a cursory look into any of the interviews she's given, and it's really clear that she just like. And this isn't me personalizing it. This is literally like based on what she says in interviews. Is like. She's sustained some damage from like the relationships that she had growing up, and she doesn't have enough people around her like intellectually and like just interpersonally to sort of say, babe, like you like projecting that into like an alleged like social wide like policy this is not a good idea. Or even if they just, I don't know, like I know I sound condescending and I don't really care, but like it's pretty clear that that's what's animating a lot of the shit that she talks about and wants to apply, on a society-wide scale. And it's just like, I'm sorry that happened, but what you're saying doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think with so many of these people in the movement, they have no like people skills and are ones who have like frail families, so they just believe that's what the whole world should be, and I think that's why they're so quick to like jump on you. I mean, I remember a Warren campaigner did a whole tweet. I'm like, oh, this person I could hear was being abused, and I talked to her about how amazing Warren is a role model. It's like this person's being domestically abused, and you're like, promoting it for a Warren campaign, and then they blocked me for saying you're a piece of shit, and it's like. Well, what do you think someone's going to do? Like, rational people don't just
it's brutally exploitative, all of this, because it's a market. The market doesn't give a shit about anyone. It can't.
Yeah.
It's a category error to pretend that it can. Same reason why I'm just getting increasingly frustrated with that little fucking peacock worm, Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka.
Nathan J. Willy Wonka of Current Affairs magazine.
What the fuck are you talking about? People are being mean and your politics is about like empathy and caring about people. This is a lie. I've seen the way you and your colleagues treat people on an interpersonal basis. So stop bullshitting. Just cut it out, mate. Like nobody's politics can be about just, we care about everybody. Okay, that's what every fucking HR department in the country says, mate.
So people don't often know the history of like utopian socialism, right? In terms of like this distinction that exists.
Totally. And I have literally no, something I've always been extremely allergic to and very much tried to avoid in the way that I sort of engage with the political is like all these references to like obscure socialist history or sectarian nonsense, because I just think to a large extent that serves as kind of an utterly unnecessary barrier to entry. Like I feel like it's mostly like a sort of like attempt of people to sort of signal bona fides as opposed to actually convey anything. So I'm pretty allergic to like referencing all this like antiquated stuff generally. But essentially there was like some of Marx's like most prolific diss tracks were, and Engels as well, actually, for that matter, were against the anarchists or the utopian socialists, so people like Proudhon, because like their brand of socialism, which was the predominant, if not only one prior to Marx, was basically a bunch of like petite bourgeois people having sort of charitable and sentimental attachments to the idea of a better world. But invariably, because their way of engaging particular problems didn't in any way look at the labor relation, it didn't look at like materially what was going on, it invariably meant sort of coming up with all these fantastic notions that ultimately, depending sort of which brand of it was your brand, ultimately sort of sent the working class face first into the New Jerusalem, as he put it in the manifesto. It's just basically like, the best laid plans of the technocrats and middle managers that ultimately recruit the working class to what is actually their class cause, as opposed to getting behind the working class and actually looking at this like materially, as in like through the economic relations and the attendant contradictions of the status quo. Like the whole point of what Marx and Engels basically like projects were to say it's no good to sit around hypothesizing about like a world that could be, or a world that based on sentimentalism or moralism and all this like right think, wrong think nonsense, because it'll never achieve what you want it to. The only way that any of this ever does anything useful is by starting with the economic relations in society. And I just think that like to an enormous extent, the total incoherence of anarchist or utopian thinking, and all the like a complete inability of it to do anything that it wants to do. Like everything that we're seeing today is just like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a much more, interesting arguments that were had 150 years ago. Like the fact that even anyone would need to like point out that like the shitty moralism of someone like a Nathan Robinson is just a complete fucking waste of time. Like the fact that he goes around saying he's a Proudhonist without like just being laughed out of town is embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Wearing a peacock costume while he says he's a Proudhonist. And yeah.
Honestly, like I in many ways, I do think, however, and I sort of said this on my podcast, is like actually like he's sort of less dangerous in a way, because he's in like he's not compelling to anyone but like a very narrow slice of pretty rich people, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not going to convince anyone that what he's doing is actually a working class project, because he's running around in a peacock costume talking about luxury leftism, abolishing cars, and driving around in a 1950s one. Like he's silly, like he's whatever. But someone like a fucking Mikey Utrecht and Bashkar and all the rest, like if you have a proletarianizing PMC class and these motherfuckers are pretending to do something that is labor related and honestly like quite often actually doing stuff that's labor related, but they can't like, okay, so when the whole like Nathan Robinson doesn't like Marx because he's a big meanie poo thing happened, instead of actually dealing with the substance of that, which is Nathan Robinson is overtly saying he's a Proudhonist, like utopian socialist, which we as alleged Marxists, like the history there is like clear, like it's unambiguous. Like this is a no good, very bad, not helpful orientation if we are in fact Marxists. Instead, everyone just enacted a form of like market segmentation where these so-called Marxists went, why is everybody being so fucking mean to poor little Nathan? he just said he doesn't like Marx. It's fine. Don't be so mean. I wish he liked Marx, though. It's just like you boys are just doing market segmentation. You realize there's like, yeah, there might be some overlap, but you're not necessarily competitors in this like market for socialism, TM.
Well, I mean,
that's all that whole thing was, you know, like that none of them engaged with the actual like the political content there.
Right, and this is an actual division that exists, which is to say that there are people who are sort of going around under the brand of socialism TM, who kind of believe that like the thing holding us back is that like people just have the wrong ideas in their head, and if that was just a little nicer, then we would live in a utopia.
Insane.
And this is
fucking insane.
Yeah, and the other part is that you've been making this point recently about like that they are sort of enacting the same idea that like these might be very genuine, sincere people. It actually doesn't really matter what they are just enacting a class politics. They are acting in a class interest.
Less sincere. This is why I'm more like, okay, someone who seems like a blatant like carnival barker hack worries me less than someone whose sentiments are sincere.
Yeah. Yeah, they can do less damage at least, I guess, or they will be taking fewer people. Yes, exactly. And so why do you feel sort of most animated by that? I mean, I think I understand, but I feel like it maybe doesn't get said out loud enough.
Yeah, I mean, increasingly, I think, look, I mean, my politics have definitely sharpened over the last 18 months. And I think anyone who listens to the podcast will have probably observed that. And I've sort of tried to signpost that as it's been occurring. So I hope that like the sort of degree to which I've become like more conventionally like communist, for lack of a better expression, like, or at least sort of like Marxist in my like analysis in a kind of more orthodox sense, I guess. Like I've tried to sort of signpost that, but in so doing, what's become really clear is that like a whole lot of what we're seeing happen is the sort of class politics of I think a lot of what we've seen for years and years and years flying under the left banner is the politics of the it's like a PMC politics. Like this has gone back to the 70s when all the sort of new left were hypothesizing about their little brand of politics. And it was one thing when that sort of strata was either ascendant or at least not threatened in terms of their structural role. But I think what happened in 2008 was a game changer for the Petite Bourge insofar as the fairly safe path that an upper middle class kid could take to retain and perhaps even increase their capacity to be a sort of upper middle class person was decimated, and a shit ton of people who would have previously comfortably had a bunch of underlings and subordinates to manage and to feel superior to, that would encourage them to continue associating with or having an affinity for ruling class ideology. A shit ton of these people have materially been threatened with precarity, the precarity that the working class already faces every day, and they don't like it. They don't like it at all, which again is understandable. But I just think to an inordinate degree, this like utopian socialism and anarchism itself, these are inherently like petty bourgeois orientations who are parasitic on the status quo, and the sort of fortifying and reiteration of those particular forms of politics and like coercive, unaccountable kind of political discipline have been occurring because a whole bunch of those people do not want to like join the working class or any kind of working class project. And so they've been cosplaying as workers in this kind of incredibly mystifying way. But I think to the extent that, like, I'm under no illusions. I'm not trying to win people over. I don't think that you advance any kind of working class movement by getting a bunch of, like, rich kids to think the right way. But I do think that because these people have a fairly sizable audience and people, especially who are like, you're not going to be reading a lot of these people. Maybe now you are, but at least like a little while ago, a lot of people reading this stuff like actually had inclinations or intuitions that something wasn't right, like that shit is weird, that shit is wrong, right? And so if they're then being fed with all this, like, hate to say it, but like counter-revolutionary, like ultimately reactionary bullshit, that seems like a real, like, wasted opportunity to me. Now, ordinarily, like, I don't think you advance your own project by being like especially obsessed with or trying to win the affinity of all these like rich twats. But if they're going around claiming the mantle of like a working class politics, when in fact what they're doing is a disciplinary set of politics that tries to maintain their own position above the working class as their fucking managers, then sorry, I'm happy to take a bit of sheen off that.
Yep.
Because what you're doing is bullshit. Sorry.
Yeah, we're kind of seeing it now with like the other contention for like red states in the U.S. We see so many like progressive, like left people like Cenk Uygur and other like current affairs Jacobin shitheads being like, the red states are actually leeches and welfare queens on all the blue states, and they're actually the problem, and they should all this change. It's like, these people, for one, like, it's no sense of like why these states are poor and why others are rich.
Mask off.
But it's like it is like they literally have they've never learned nothing after almost 8 years of like trying to build a movement or whatever the fuck they're trying to do. And it's like, the South has lots of working people. Why are you just trying to like call them racist? Like, Micah, what is Utrecht? His name?
Micah Utrecht.
Just
your favorite, your friend, Micah.
He just posted today like, America's racist, America's blah blah, and it's like, yeah, that's really gonna win over the masses by just calling them all.
They're not. They've already given up on the masses. They're not trying to. They're doing their own class project, and I think the more we can start to see it as such, the more the like silly behavior isn't actually contradictory. Like, it's totally in line with that class project. And once you see it as such, it's so much easier to make sense of it. Like, it's no longer discombobulating to see like the asinine shit that they pull. It's just like, oh yeah, that is what you would say, like in line with the interests that you're representing. Like this fucking, I'm sorry, I read his book. And ultimately, these people genuinely think that like it is their role as, quote, movement socialists to infiltrate the rank and file of unions in order to like then better represent the workers in the unions by animating the rank and file to vote for them and their mates to form the bureaucracy of the unions instead of the existing strata of managers. Like, it's just such a fucking managerial project. It's not even funny. Like, bitch, you think workers need Megan Day and the likes of her to infiltrate them so that they can gain power? The fuck are you talking about? This is the person who, like, just stop.
I just saw Joshua for Congress.
Give it a rest, mate.
Joshua for Congress, like a week or two ago, did that. He's like, if my campaign fails, I'm gonna go into the unions and start unionizing. It's like,
unionizing what, bitch? What are you talking about?
He's like an anarchist who's like, oh, I'm going to read Marx, and everyone is following. Like, actually, don't read Marx. Read Kropotkin. He's better. And it's like.
Yes, please. No, this is what I'm saying. Please do read Kropotkin. I would rather these people be like learning that asinine crap so that like that's the bullshit that they're huffing instead of pretending to do anything. Like, yeah, whatever. Anyway.
But it's interesting when you sort of see the like when people sort of have these fantasies of becoming the managers of the working class who will lead them to the promised land.
Yeah.
Is that they
because they need those people to fight their class enemies for them, which is why you get all these billionaires oligarchy talk.
But what's also fascinating is like just how disconnected. If you've talked to a worker, it's like it's all this sort of abolish the family shit, and like some of these projects like
absurd on its face.
Well, yeah, we're nationalizing private golf courses.
It's ridiculous. The fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
people like having kids. Shut up, you moron. What the fuck are you talking about?
Well, yeah, but
I'm sorry, but like that any of that facile bullshit gets even a second's countenance is to me indicative of just how deranged these people are, and they don't even see it. That's what's amazing to me. Like that anyone could defend that fucking ridiculous DSA meeting last year where people couldn't clap because otherwise half the audience would start stimming out. You people are, I'm sorry, but this is a playpen. This is a kindergarten. Like, what are you doing?
A factory floor, a steel mill or something, giant hammer, steam hammers.
Sorry, no,
I'm triggered.
Even your average, no, but like none of this has to be like, I don't want to get I don't want anything. I don't care what they accuse me of, but like people love to accuse like, oh, Aimee's pretending to be some working class whisperer speaking for like, these like white cis-het able-bodied factory workers that don't exist. Bitch, you take that game to any fucking McDonald's and tell me how it works for you. Take it to the kitchen of any McDonald's. Or take it to like, fucking the shop floor of a Walmart or anywhere. Like take it anywhere.
Well, or take it to the kitchen.
Everybody laughs at you because you're fucking clowns. This is clownish bullshit and you know it.
Yeah.
Somewhere deep down they know it, which is why they get so fucking mad from when anyone from inside their ranks has the audacity to criticize their bullshit because it's indefensible. That's why they have to erase people. It's because their bullshit is asinine and indefensible and they have no arguments. And they know it doesn't appeal deep, deep, deep down. And what they're really worried about is like any kind of actual working class project, which is why their whole thing is like necessarily like filled with bullshit that will never appeal because it was never a working class project. I'm sorry. It's just...
I mean, that's where you think... breaths. We're going to get through this together.
It's fine.
I mean, it is fascinating, right? To the like, just how ridiculous it is when you think that the political project that is attempted that they are attempting to deliver, if you gave it to like the janitorial staff in some random office building, you would get absolutely fucking nothing back. But if you give it to like the HR department, they'll be like, oh yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. And here's something interesting. A couple of years ago in sort of peak Me Too, I was chatting with a girl who at the time of the Shitty Me Men list, my personal favorite, Moira Donegan. So Moira Donegan's ostensible reason for her informal sex offender registry was that she wanted to just make sure she protected women and put out, something that was akin to a whisper network because it was, all these predators were in these, working in this environment. So she just shared it with like fellow women. Anyway, I found that just fascinating. It's the whole like neoliberalism loves a traumatized woman thing that I'm banging on about all the time. But I had a friend who at the time was working at a publishing company who got a copy of the thing. And I asked her and she was unambiguously, I was like, so did Moira like share this with any of the, janitorial staff, any, people who work in the same buildings? Like, was this in any way, like if allegedly that's the purpose of this thing, was it in any way communicated with, shared with, conveyed to like some of the most vulnerable or least sort of the people with the least capacity to exert kind of leverage against any predatory behavior in an office building? Right. Nah.
Oh.
It was emailed to,
Right, and the janitorial staff are all, temporary contractors, so they don't get email accounts, right?
Well, but even so, like it was such bullshit on its face. Like this was a brilliant career move. It was a savvy career move, you know. And the fact that like that she could come out, but like I read this shit that Katie Royfey wrote. So what happened was there's a big drama about 2 years ago when like the entirety of like the fucking Jezebel readership and writership in New York was shitting the bed on Twitter because allegedly Katie Royfey was going to expose the creator of the list. Katie Royfey just asked a couple of questions in relation to a lengthier piece she was writing. She never said she was going to expose anyone, but like these like media hustlers just all like flocked together like birds of a feather and went into overdrive, like wetting the bed about it. And so that gave Moira an even better opportunity to come out as like being really brave. And like I decided to do the big reveal because I was threatened. And it's just like, bitch, please, we know what you're doing. You're really good at it. It's great. Fine, whatever. But like, don't for a second pretend that this was like, you know, some act of nobility. It's fine, whatever. It is what it is. But like, anyway, so yeah, the point being that is just like, I think, a prime example of the way these like, I got in a bunch of trouble around the time of Me Too for simply pointing out that this had nothing to do with working class women. Like, this wasn't about working women. This is about a specific strata of people. And it had nothing to do with women as such. It also had nothing to do with the facts of sexual assault and what the real problems are in relation to sexual assault. And I was called all manner of things, like a rape apologist and all this other bullshit. And it's just like, dude, half the people in the shitty media men list didn't face any consequences because leftism TM was ascendant at the time. And the other half, or the people who are dramatically affected by it, are the people who are either fucking awkward or losers or on the way out anyway, as a way of sweeping out the trash in like a planned obsolescence kind of way. Or it was very, very effective at getting rid of people whose politics they found problematic. So writers who were writing things that would sort of go against the party line or be a little bit problematic, they're the ones for whom things like the shitty media men list had consequences. And the people who were completely fucking banal but still complete perverts, it didn't affect them at all, Doug Henwood. What?
Well, that's what's funny with like the Me Too thing is I think everyone like in this PMC class were like, oh, it's going to change everything. And when you look what happened, it's just like...
What are you talking about? Shut the fuck up.
Like literally all we've got is like a few documentaries, like a few cases, and then we have like both candidates for the parties now are like have tons of allegations against like, oh, look what happened. Like nothing. You've done jack shit. And instead just attacked everyone who was critical of your cause, like you.
It was an AWFL witch hunt. Like the tables are finally turned. Instead of the women being the witches, it's like they're like lashing out.
Well, it's like even like AOC types are like being like, oh well, maybe it happened.
Yeah, she's like, an AWFL. Of course, yeah, she's an instrument. She's an instrument of party discipline. Of course, that's what she'll say. Grow up, anyone who thinks she wouldn't.
Yeah, I like that she's come around to.
Well, you didn't notice where she like gave credence to the fucking anti-Semitism accusations against Ilhan, saying, "Oh, this is nice because Ilhan can learn and grow." Bitch, that was a year ago. Yeah. Fuck off.
Look at even Ilhan now is like voting on like APAC
yeah,
things.
She's all up in it. Yeah. Look at all this. There's white supremacy everywhere. There's fascism everywhere. What the fuck are you talking about? Grow up. I just can't handle this Dungeons and Dragons bullshit. It's a class war politics. If you are anything that involves witch hunting, metaphorically, a witch hunt of any kind, it harms people without power. Sorry. So I have no time. I don't give any track to witch hunting of any kind. Sorry.
So
it's just bad politics. It's reactionary on its face.
Dare I ask then, for the benefit of our listeners, sort of how you've what's been your reaction to Tara Reid Me Tooing Joe Biden? How do you sort of feel like that's going?
I have no opinion on the veracity of her claims. I have no interest in litigating it. I don't know. I have no privileged access to any information that would make me more or less aware.
Damn it, why do we bring women on the show, Sam, if they don't have it?
I just don't care enough, because honestly, to me, it's like, okay, I'll bite the bullet, assuming everything that she's saying is true. Like, it just, for the sake of argument, let's just bite that bullet, assume it's all true. What's the political upshot of this? What are we trying to do here?
Well, do you think if for the left, right?
What is the left? Well, yeah. Where's like the left?
Let's use the broadest possible sense of the left. Looking and
meaning
sneering
what?
at, I mean, not Democrats. People who are not Democrats who are more radical than
like the bratty subs.
Yeah, exactly.
Bratty subs don't like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So kind of thinking they're making a profound and deep point by going, oh well, the Democrats aren't so into believing women now, are they? And like, we've owned them with their hypocrisy. Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, it feels rather pathetic.
Which women?
All women, Aimee, except you.
Which women?
We don't believe you.
And Angela.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, like, what are we doing here? What do you think a president does?
What do you sexually think assaults?
Other than that, right? Like, to me, what this reeks of is this petty bourgeois inclination to want to like wash your hands of it, to like have clean hands for your filthy fucking excuse my language, filthy class interested project. But you just don't want the seams to be ripping. You don't want it to be uncouth. You don't want the fact that being the administrator of the largest military ever known to mankind and the biggest empire that does inordinate amounts of damage to women all day, every day, all over the world, like the empire that fucking drone bombs American citizens overseas in Pakistani weddings and shit. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, let's say he finger blasted her and lied about it. Okay. It's not even the top 20 worst things he's done in his career. But it's just visceral to you because she's kind of similar to you. Like, one relatively wealthy woman, somehow, like, the fact that Joe Biden might have got his hands dirty with her, and I'm sorry that came across as more literal than perhaps my metaphor intended, but, like, honestly, they just want clean hands. It's like, bitch, he wrote the crime bill. Do you understand how much rape happens in prison? He agitated for the Iraq War, not just voted for it. Like, he was in the Senate in the late 90s, early 2000s, like haranguing Scott Ritter, one of the UN weapons inspectors, suggesting that we needed to invade because Saddam absolutely had WMDs. Like, this motherfucker, his hands are dripping with blood. What are you talking about? What are we doing here? Do you actually believe liberalism more than the liberals do? Because it sort of seems to me you kind of have to for this to be the problem. Do you get what I mean? Like, if this is it, if this is your dividing line, what planet do you live on? Honestly, what fucking planet do you live on?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. No, I mean, it's the charge.
It's so insane to me.
But this is like old, like sort of, for the people who have maybe joined the DSA or started reading Jacobin or whatever, but where their instincts are deeply still trained by like watching Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, whose entire bit was, look at this bit of political hypocrisy. Isn't that the most, me pointing this out is powerful and brave. And I think people think this is like, they got him. We got him, boys.
You moron. What do you think liberalism is? The whole thing is like it's an artifice designed to like paper over hypocrisy. Like, it's literally, the whole thing is circular. It has no content, has no political content. It just gives you procedure. Like, honestly, hypocrisy is a procedural critique. It's not even substantive. You're literally just saying, well, you said something different earlier. Okay, and? Like, in philosophy, we call this a tu quo fallacy. Like, it's not even saying anything. It's not. What are you doing?
Right. It's the hypocrisy being sort of structural or inherent to the ideology that they're perpetuating is not an interesting and profound point, right?
Well, to observe that and be perturbed by it to me suggests that you're buying all the premises. Like it
Right.
fucking like it's just silly. It's like, but of course, it should, like, is the natural response. You know, like, and none of this is, again, like, I think part of the perniciousness of Me Too discourse, and I think it's especially apparent here, is that it is beneficial for media companies and publications and journalists and whomever else to give us this totally bifurcated debate between do you or do you not believe women, um, and then to litigate like all these petty little elements of Tara's story. And I think the moment that you do that, you're on their turf. Like, I don't, I see no political content in the notion of whether or not we believe her. Like, I don't know what happened. I have no reason to believe her or not believe her, you know? Like, I don't have any insight into this. I don't know her. I don't disbelieve her. I also think that the vast majority empirically of the issues associated with sexual assault have absolutely nothing to do with either confusion about consent or with believing or disbelieving women. And so to me, this was always such an obfuscatory technique that bypasses all of the material problems associated with sexual assault, all of the class contradictions attendant in sexual assault as like a mass phenomena. And so I'm not prepared to do that. I don't see what that does other than use like women as a women's trauma as kind of like as clickbait ultimately.
Yeah.
Like, it's gross to me. Like, I'm not playing that game. Sorry, Nathan. You want to?
I'm sure there's 10,000 words been written while we've been talking about.
Oh yes, of course. He's dug through the records to tell us all about what happened in 1982 and how dare Matt Glacius in any way look at the facts and question facts. Also, like, sorry, I know I'm rambling,
no,
but like. Part of the role of a journalist, and I realize this is like pure fantasy land, but at least some of the better journalists still doing the rounds have some commitment to the idea of like objectivity and like verifying of facts and that sort of thing. So I don't know, people like Matt Taibbi, for one, is like, yeah, I think I have some fair idea of what his politics are, but I also think that he doesn't sort of, he doesn't write as a partisan in terms of like the two sides of partisan politics. He tries at the very least to at least, you know, engage with the facts on the ground. But I think a lot of what's happening in this Me Too discourse is where, like, again, this kind of social discipline kicks in where if anyone's like, as a journalist, engaging with facts or attempting to like put together some kind of like, you know, verifying things or investigating things, which is necessarily what you have to do when someone comes to you with an uncorroborated story. You need to then dig into the record to try to find facts that either confirm or disconfirm what you're being told. This is what a journalist necessarily does and or should do, right? But like, you see this play out among the blue checks on Twitter where like if someone's attempting just to do that, passing no like normative comments on Tara, not engaging in any kind of like slut shaming or like, you know, silly like Madonna whore bullshit, like literally just trying to like verify or disconfirm facts. Suddenly it's like, why don't you believe her? Why are you trying to undermine her? Why are you trying to undermine a survivor's story? It's just like, well, look, if somebody comes to the fucking national media in relation to a presidential candidate, this is necessarily what's going to happen. And you don't get to be like a fucking bush lawyer for Tara in the media like Nathan or Crystal Ball are doing and not think that other people are going to be engaging with seeing whether the story checks out. that doesn't make them rape apologists or doubting a woman's story. Like people can be mistaken or have facts wrong without being liars, and this happens a lot with suddenly everyone's a fucking trauma expert. And it's just like, well, that happens a lot with trauma too, is that someone can, memories are created and recreated every time you tell them. That's how memory works. Like, you recreate the actual neural pathways in your retelling of the story each time. It's not like a fucking videotape. And so someone can literally be telling the truth telling the truth as they've come to believe it, but being mistaken, right? Like this doesn't have to be personal. Like, someone can be telling the truth and just be wrong.
Well, but if the stakes of it are that this is the only reason we would have not to support Joe Biden, then clearly you can't.
Yeah, again, so then we're talking about a political difference. It's like, what kind of crack are you smoking if this is the make or break for you? Honestly, it just... These motherfuckers kill people every day at the touch of a button. I'm sorry, but being frisky with an intern isn't even close to the worst thing this motherfucker's done or will do.
Yes, I mean the sexual history of Bill Clinton has been thoroughly rewritten, right? From yes, indiscretion, that was bad because he was treating a woman poorly, but the fact that he launched cruise missiles into Sudan and blew up his pharmaceutical factory in order to distract from it and his lies about it. But that's sort of people he was, I miss Clinton.
It happens,
No one left to lie to, baby.
Oh, hell yeah. I read books.
I know it's trendy. I know it's trendy to hate on Hitchens because he's a trot-tone neocon, I guess.
I like the guy.
But motherfucker, if we still had anyone who gave enough of a shit the way people like him did, that would be good. Because even when you disagreed with him, it was up front and in the open, right? He's saying, I'm taking this position on X. You don't have to agree with him, but the political content was front loaded. And I think right now what we're seeing to an inordinate degree is the political content is being mystified and sublimated and distorted by a lot of this shit. And so I don't know, it makes you sort of get a bit nostalgic for Hitch.
Bit weepy. No, it's funny. It's not trendy to still like him, but I agree. I mean, his defense of the Iraq, whip smart, and that thing is his defense of the Iraq War was one of the only times I ever actually had to stop and think about that and be like, shit, my ideas are really being challenged here. I still think terrible idea, but fuck, I really did have to turn on the old gears.
Yes, and if you're never having anyone even come close to challenging your shit, that's when you should be really worried. That's when I think you have a huge fucking problem.
It's interesting that Tucker. It's unfortunate. Tucker Carlson in his
Comrade Tucker.
I mean, it's funny. He's such a figure of controversy because he's such a shadow of his former self. I mean, his 90s Tucker as a writer was actually
but he's not a writer now though.
No, exactly. He's a bizarre puppy dog, do the dog and mirror side head turn.
I have a soft spot for Tucker.
No, I mean he's not,
because it's what I've always said, an aristocratic sensibility where he can back certain principles that he has, irrespective of market preference for or against them. And he's also just he's a bulldog who doesn't like bullshit. And I think that if you had more people in Washington who don't like bullshit, who had a fair bit of cynicism towards the media class, that would be a good thing. Now, none of this is any kind of uncritical support for everything that he says. I don't agree with him on plenty of stuff. But I think often the reason that the media leftoids despise him has nothing to do with substantive political content. It's the mere fact that he's actually antagonistic towards people that shits them off, because most journalists aren't antagonistic anymore. And that's what really grinds their gears.
Well, that's why we have Aimee Terese on. I mean, and yeah, shout out to all the haters who this is the only episode of Twink Revolution they'll ever listen to, and the other episode you've been on. So hi guys, nice to see you. Welcome.
Haters make you famous.
Yeah. So I think that's about all the time we have.
I listened to your episode with Oliver, by the way. It was very nice. I think, yeah, that was particularly one thing he said that I thought was like, damn, he's right. Where he sort of, and I think I've recognized this, but like where he was like, yeah, I think Aimee was probably a little naive at the outset of that election. I think that's absolutely right. Like,
weren't we all?
Yeah, but like even so, like I remember particularly late 2018, there was a bit of like a DSA related controversy that sort of happened, and then like Adolf Reed wrote a response to it, and like having been in touch with him in relation to that, I sort of had more of a front row seat than I would have to other things like that in the past, and I remember at the time saying, like, don't be under any illusions, folks. Like these, just because you attend the same DSA chapter as these like blue check media types, like this or that doesn't mean they're your friend. Like they'll 100% shiv you when capital comes calling. But like in my brain, what I was talking about was like, some people who work at The Nation or New Republic or whatever. But like, I just, for some fucking reason, I'd yet to simply bite that bullet in relation to people like Bashkar, etc., as though they were in some like separate, special, magical category outside of, class and career and broader like interests, as though they existed outside those structures. Of course they don't, Aimee. Like, what you think they're like magically committed to something that makes them like exempt from like social forces? Get real.
Well,
like,
I mean, but it felt so refreshing.
That I can say the shit I do is because I'm not within that milieu, that they don't have any material leverage over me. It's not that I'm some fucking like beacon of truth and light, it's simply that like they can't get me fired despite their best efforts. That's it. That's the only difference.
And you're a little Aussie battler, which is, as you say, it's that it's just not the way you do it. You gotta be nice.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. I'm allergic to fake nice. I'd rather someone just be like honest and have your back, even if they're a cunt sometimes, like I'd rather that. Fine.
So check out What's Left with Oliver Bateman, the aforementioned Oliver Bateman, and Aimee Terese. It's an excellent podcast. I subscribe and enjoy it all the time. We'll give a link in the bio.
Mate. Yeah, thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aimee.